welcome to Ground Level's Wednesday Wisdom. It's great to be back with you. We've had a bit of a summer season off Wednesday Wisdom as we've been busy with the one event and other activities, but we're back. And to kick us off in this next season, we're talking about creating a welcoming culture as a church. And as a team, we're thinking who better to talk about welcoming people well than our very own Mr. Daniel Hargreaves. So welcome, Dan. It's great to have you with us today.
Oh, thanks, Jason. Delighted to be with everyone. Hopefully, there'll be some pearls of wisdom as we chat through today.
I'm very sure there will. So, Dan, we'll get straight into it. So, what do you think are some of the key aspects to welcoming people well?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jason. What a great subject. And I think you kind of summed it up really well with saying a welcoming culture. And I think culture, we would all know as leaders that culture is one of the best friends that you can have as a church. It creates momentum of new people joining. It does so much. And we've all heard it, haven't we? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch and dinner. You might have the best vision and values on your walls, but if you don't back them up and put legs on that, you don't create a culture. You see, I'm a firm believer in the values that you have to be operational. So everyone has to own them to move them forward. And that's how you create a culture. I think for me, you've got to come back to the why, haven't it? Why do we want to be welcome? Because we are all welcome into God's family. And it should be, counterculture, the best place of family, the most outrageous welcome. It should be the best place for hospitality because we're in God's house, isn't it? Whether you're in the community, you're in your life group, your connect group, your community projects, or wherever it's actually church on a Sunday. But it should be the place that everyone feels so welcome. So I think for me, culture is the most important thing, that everybody embraces it and they take responsibility for that kind of culture. Because anyone who comes into church, we've got to realize it's sometimes hard for people to come into church. So we've got to create that atmosphere in any of our projects. This is not just about Sunday gatherings. In any of our projects where people feel outrageously welcome because it's God's heart that he welcomes us in. And I'm sure we all know that, people decide whether they want to come back to your church after 7 minutes, before a preach often has ever been preached or before worship has started. People are looking and they're observing. And I remember, me going into churches, it is that feeling, that's culture. What does it feel like? Is there a faith atmosphere? Is a dynamic? And you can have that with not anyone saying anything to you. So I think for me, why is it important? We've got to remember the why we're doing it. We're welcoming into people, into God's family. We'll welcome them into God's house if it's a Sunday meeting. And it's the Father heart of God that welcomes everybody. So we've got to remember the why we do it. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Dan. And I think it'd be really good to just kind of say how for some of that stuff. How do we practically do that? You mentioned the first 7 minutes, and I think suddenly that probably shifts our thinking, doesn't it, in how we start our services?
Yeah.
How what kind of hospitality there is before the service begins. What's been kind of some of your personal experience of how you've practically created that atmosphere?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I guess for us as leaders, and we've got to get a culture of kind of leadership and people taking responsibility, that people own it. So it's, like I said, it's not just something on the wall, but everybody's thinking, right, I can play a part in this. And we often use, don't we? I say take responsibility. I love the Message Bible. It says, grab the initiative. And I think that's been one of my lifelong kind of like values, that like if someone's coming new in, grab the initiative. And how can we do that? Well, think about what welcome would you like? Imagine you're going into church for the first time in, or a community program. How would you like to be welcomed? Whether you're introvert or extrovert, you want to be welcomed because you're making a big step on doing that. So I think for me, one of the key things is having great team, an empowered team who take responsibility for that kind of the values of what you have as a church. I always say to our people, when we gather on a Sunday, so I use a Sunday as a bit of an idea for this. I always say to the people in the car park, who are the most important people here at church today? And they look at me and they smile and they say, I am. And what they're saying is the car park people are the first people that often people see. So in our setting, we had a car park that then went into the front entrance. And the car park people were the ones, if it was raining, had an umbrella. They were opening doors. They were introducing people to people they might buddy up with in the service. So all them practicalities, I think, are so, so important. We used to have, and for those who've been to a Live Lincoln South, we used to be called a Live Hikem, as part of a live church, one of the locations. We used to have a bouncy castle there every week. And I know families who used to go for the first time. They would say the kids would talk about the church with a bouncy castle. And I think that's important because it's fun. It shows vibrancy. It shows energy. It shows that we're actually thinking about kids. I'm kind of still in that season of life where it's hard getting the kids out the door, so to know that they're going to go to a kind of community that's going to welcome them with a bouncy castle is brilliant. I think for me as well, and I'll probably touch on this a bit later, that pre and post service, I think, are more important than we ever think. I remember walking into a church and literally going straight into the church, the doors open, straight into the church, straight into the service. It felt cold. It felt cold with people not welcoming me. It felt cold in the building. And I didn't feel like I was set to worship God. Whereas some of the churches and what we're trying to create here with teams taking responsibility is that we're thinking about if there's new people, can they get a welcome bag? We always give out a welcome bag. It's got a little bit of chocolate, vision and values of the church. But it's actually us saying, hey, it's great to see you here. We always have cookies and donuts and great tea and great coffee. Because again, it's like people go to Starbucks and they expect that service. Now, we're not service because we don't want to be a consumer church, but we do want to make people feel welcome. And I think that's really, really important. I often use the kind of analogy, and we've been using it a lot. We've slightly reinvented our model at Alive Church, where we've gone from kind of one church, then locations, and now we've gone into communities. So we've got about 18 communities. And one of the analogies that we've been using often is that we're not a restaurant. So people don't come and we serve them and we just, make it and they walk out. We're trying to create a family meal vibe. Where if you're in a family meal, you contribute. You bring something. It might be a party game. It might be a pudding. It might be a dessert. You might help with the washing up afterwards or whatever it is. And I think that's one of the welcoming, kind of like cultures that we want. We want to create not consumers, we want to create contributors. And I think when you have that culture of everyone mucks in, everyone gets involved with a level of excellence, it really sets people up well. And I think you have to practically have great teams in place. So I've talked about a car park team. I've talked about kids and youth pastors. So, when we meet on a Sunday, if there's new people coming in, they've got kids or youth, the youth and kids pastors know that they need to be on hand to welcome and just explain to a parent, oh, this is what happens with kids. We're all DBS check, the practicalities, but really to say hello. I love our host team when they see people and they actually sit people next to people who are at similar lifestyle than them. And it's just brilliant to see it because then people feel connected and they feel really welcome. So I guess the hows are have great teams that are empowered to get involved with that. And I would say a welcome team is essential. We call it a host team. Looking out for new people. Like I said, with the welcome bags, sitting them next to people, showing them where things are. It's so funny because over the summer, we were away on holiday and me and Joe went to this other church. I won't mention, but it's a well-known church. You would know what church it was. And it was really funny. So the church, I thought, started at 10:15. That's what it said on the website. So doors open at 10 for a 10:15 start. So like me, it always winds you up, but I always get there 10 minutes early. And we're sitting in the car and the doors were closed. And I thought, oh, this is a bit funny. They started a queue outside. And, it got to 10:05. No one opened the doors. And then suddenly the doors opened. A whole host of people came out. And we walked in. And everyone was very welcoming. They were just saying, hello, hello. Not much more chat than that. But then we sat on the second row because I'm like, it's 10 past, the service is going to start. The service didn't start till 10:30. And in that time, no one came up and spoke to us. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, Dan, you should have spoken to them. But I'm thinking of family who they've never seen before. No one physically came up and welcomed us. And I know that I was on a bit of a back foot. I felt a bit like, oh, no one's really noticed, or There's no friendly. I don't feel like I'm being welcomed. So I think having teams who are really focused on welcoming your new people, or welcoming, there might be a mum or dad who doesn't want to be there. How can we make their experience of the Father heart of God and church really great for them? Hopefully that's covered a few hows.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, Dan. And I think you kind of touched on this, but making everyone responsible for this, that,
Yeah,
it's not just the job of the host team or the welcome team. It's
yeah.
not just a new people team. It's actually everyone that sat there in the service is a part of this, making people feel welcome, speaking to people, not getting in little cliques or bubbles, but being really welcoming and accepting of new people and people that are coming for the first time. I think that's so good. There's loads of gold in there for people to take away, which
And
is
it's a
really
great
good.
shout, Chase, because what happens there is then when people have been welcomed, excuse me, in that way, then they do it themselves because they know how amazing it was to be welcomed. So then culture just rose on. You often hear that with Alpha, don't you? The people who join, who do Alpha, then they join the next one or two Alpha as team members because they knew what it meant for them. And then you create that culture of doing it. Sorry, I interrupted, mate.
Oh no, that's brilliant. No, it's really good. So obviously this is bigger than just someone that just comes for the one day. The whole kind of creating a welcoming culture is a bigger picture than that.
Yeah.
And what would you say is kind of next for someone who's, maybe come to church once or twice, kind of is still new in church? What kind of would you say is the journey you take them on to really feeling a part of who you are and a part of the church? What has been your kind of uh, lesson or learning in that area and how to do that well?
Yeah, I think the next steps, Jace, as you say, is essential because we don't just want to have this outrageous welcome and then go, oh, right, you're part of church now. Because what we've got to remember is sometimes when you're living it day in and breathing it day out, you know the vision, you know the values, and you can sometimes, as a pastor, forget that other people aren't quite up to that journey. So what we do various things, but our clear kind of pathway is called our Alive Journey. So I know some churches call it next steps. Basically, the Alive Journey is what's your next steps? Rather than just walking through the door, what are you going to fit into? So pre-COVID, we used to do a welcome lunch. So every other month, we would do a welcome lunch. And that was really designed for people who maybe come once or twice, or maybe it's their first day. They wouldn't ever really have to wait more than 7 weeks, and that would be maximum, to be invited to a welcome lunch. And on that day, we'd just have a lunch straight after church. We'd do it really well, some great food. We'd have our host team in there. And then me or Joe as pastors would come up and just welcome people and say a few nice words. And then from there, we'd be really clear and really intentional about people's next steps. So we would invite them to an Alive Journey course. Now, a Live Journey course in our setting was only 2 weeks. So it was 2 evenings, and we did that straight off the welcome lunch. I think the beautiful thing with the Alive Journey is that often people would meet people who are on a similar journey to them. Who maybe they're looking, maybe they've just moved into an area, maybe they've moved church, maybe they've just become Christians and they've just come through an Alpha course or a friend's invited them. So we did two weeks and that evenings after. And the 2 weeks would really consist of the first week would be really introducing people to others, but we would find out about their journey, so why they're with us, come from, like I said, moved into the area or just exploring the faith. And we would do kind of vision and values and really get to know them. And just, in a really nice, we ran it in a coffee shop, so it was really nice, really informal, lots of chats going on. And that was week 1. And then off the back of that, and then so you would have a real picture of, so for instance, we done one last week, so it's really current. We had 12 people on that. And it was great hearing different people's journeys. So, as a pastor, I'm really understanding, right? We had a couple on there who were just exploring church. We had a lot joining lockdown, which was the majority of people, because we hadn't run a welcome night in lockdown. So it was really good to find out where people were at. And I think people really valued that. And already I've seen like a little bit of chat, Facebook chat going on with these two who met at the welcome night. So I was kind of spying in and felt that was really good. And then our second session as part of the welcome journey is really, we do something called the gift course. And it's a really basic 20 minutes and it helps discover what gifts we've got. And it's a Rick Warren thing. I think we've kind of squeezed a bit for our kind of Alive Journey. And after we find out what their gifting is, then we talk about their next steps. Now, for some people, it might be to join an Alpha course. For some people, they might be Christians already. It might be to join a Connect group or a Life group. Then the next steps might be, we talk about baptisms. And it's really, if they're Christian, we talk about, here's our kind of values of serving, of giving, of being on team, all these kind of essential items. So off the back of that, they've had at least 3 encounters with kind of the location pastors, but the host team and friends, and they've got a clearer picture of what their next steps are. And we found that really helpful. We found that the rate of people who go through that stick around church a lot more than those who are just coming along. And we found that really good. We call that a life journey. We share vision and values, and they understand a bit more about the culture as well. So that's kind of how we kind of, rather than people just walking through the doors or coming through a community program, they really get a bit of an idea of who we are as a church, and it gives them an opportunity to ask questions.
That's so good, Dan. So good. Some great nuggets of wisdom in there. And I guess we've kind of skirted around this quite a lot, this word culture. And it probably could be a topic in its own, but I wonder if you could just share quickly what your own experience is of how to both create and change culture, particularly in church. Because I think it's such a key thing when it comes to talking about these type of things. All of it comes back to, what is our culture? What culture do we want to create? So what would you say are some of your kind of nuggets of wisdom in creating or changing culture in church?
Well, that's a beautiful word you've used, Jason, the creating culture. I think leaders create and we architect culture. You have to be really purposeful on it. And you have to be on the front foot on it. You have to be very, it needs to be there, and you need to put kind of like legs on culture. And I remember sometimes, you either allow a culture, a negative culture, or you create a culture. And as we all know, we are created in the image of God. God's nature is to create. So I think it's, forgetting what's gone in the past, you have to be very proactive about, this is the culture that we want to establish. So I found sometimes, I think I've sometimes been part of things that have just been negative, and people have been talking about people in a really bad way. And I remember just thinking, right, I don't want to be part of that. So I'm going to say, hey guys, I don't want to be part of this conversation. So I'm going to talk about people in a really positive way. You have it all at your workplaces or whatever. And I think it's being proactive, and it's actually saying, I'm going to architect the culture that I want. We often do it at our team meetings, don't we? We say, let's dream about church. What can we dream? And sometimes rather than saying about some of the negatives, how can we start off with the positives? So, we could say, for instance, on a Sunday, if there's not many people there, you could go straight to that, which I think has been a church's default, rather than sharing the gold and the stories of what's been happening. So I love it with our team meetings. We share stories of, like, we had baptisms on Sunday. We started the kind of meeting off with, hey, this is what God's doing right now. And out of all them, all of them are connected with church in the last few years and made decisions to follow Jesus. Well, that's the best place to start. And that creates culture. I think you have to spot it. If someone's using I think you have to be really proactive on it. So one of our values at a live church is invitational. So when someone's invited a friend, whether it be to Alpha, a community project, or even to a church on Sunday, we want to spot it and celebrate it. If someone, for instance, one of our ladies, some of you might know, Lynn Arrowsmith, has written a book she launched, which is a phenomenal project that helps kind of women, particularly who might be low self-esteem or on their own. So she wrote a book. So we got her up here. We gave her flowers. We celebrated what she had done. And I think that creates a culture. So I want to say to people, if you've got a culture, don't just allow it. Don't just allow a culture that you're not happy with. Kingdom people create culture. It's a bit like the you're it, policy. So we're Dad, I don't feel we're praying enough in church. We're not seeing enough miracles. I say, great, you're it. What miracle, what expectation are you going to come to church with or get out on the streets and talk about? And it flips it around from, them to we're all in it together. We all take responsibility for the culture. But I definitely do think, Jason, that spotting your values. So I'm hoping that everyone's connected. Look at your values as a church because they are key. We have 10 values and I want to spot them and I want to celebrate them. And when people do one of our values, we want to say, that's who we are because that creates culture. Don't start from a negative at meetings. Don't get up there. And I see it sometimes with people when you're starting a meeting of saying like, oh, I bet you've all had a bad week. What kind of culture? Then I bet you have a bad meeting. But if you, I'm not saying don't be authentic, but there's a place to set high faith, high expectation of all the things that God can do. The possibilities of God is really good. So I think you have to be really proactive on establishing your culture. Look at your vision, talk about it. Look at your values and celebrate them and spot them and choose what church do you want to be part of? Do you want to be part of the church that gives away broken rich teas? Or do you want to be part of the generous church that gives away amazing donuts and the best coffee? That's the church I want to be part of. Why? Because it welcomes people into the house of God. Excellence is one of our values. Why wouldn't we want to do everything for God? It doesn't make sense to me. You invite people around your house. I know what you're like, Jason. You put the candles on. You put nice music in the background. You have good lighting. You spend some money on getting a really nice meal there. You ask people to take their shoes off. You take people's coat. You find out about people. You offer them a drink. Why would we not do that in church? I can't believe it because we want people to be welcome into God's house. And I think creating culture comes back to the why. It's all about Jesus, and we want people to experience Jesus. And I know that if we do the best we can to create an atmosphere for God to move, it's more likely that people will connect with God. Now, of course, I know God connects to people multiple ways, but the culture is really important, I believe.
Thanks, Dan. That is so brilliant, and I just love that that little bit that you said where you're like, don't settle for what you think is the current culture. You know, name what you want it to be, because that's how you're going to step into it. And I think just talking about it loads, and you know, in your team meetings, saying, you know, this is the culture we're creating. This is who we are. This is who we're going to be as a church. Is such a great thing just to hold. Planning a team meeting or when you're planning something that you're going to deliver, and like you say, start with the positive. You know, we start our prayers, don't we, with thank you. You know,
Yes.
you often have your little catchphrase, enter with the password thank you. Well,
Yeah.
can we start our team meetings with enter with the positive and start with something that's uplifting and going to inspire people for who we want to be, who we want to become, and what Jesus is doing in and amongst us.
Yeah.
So that's
And
so good, man.
confidence, Jason, the confidence in the culture that you are, because every church will have a different, distinct flavour. And I love that. I think we're really good at Alive Lincoln South with the hospitality and welcome. So we make sure that that's really, we're really proactive on that. So when you're looking at it, and if maybe you're a church leader or you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, we haven't really got any values. I would say, what are the things that you do really well that become quite natural to you? I know that we've all got different things. So, you know, at Live Lincoln South, I think we're very good at kind of serving and getting our hands dirty for God. We're very good at community projects and initiatives. And we're very good at that welcome. So base your values around things that you're already really good at. You know, I know sometimes we have to have aspirations that we choose and we create that culture. But as Jason said, dream about, one, what you do really well, and make sure that that's in the DNA, that's who you are, that comes really natural. Have some aspirations, but dream as a team. What do you want it to be? And then walk into and step into that.
That's so good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us and watching this week's Wednesday Wisdom. We hope you've kind of gleaned some wisdom from today's session, and we hope to see you again soon.